the Delta variant has emerged as the dominant variant. With this kind of transmission, with these kinds of numbers, we are in community transmission with the Delta variant. What we need to do is to see how best we can support the Philippines manage this situation, how best we can minimize the public health and economic impact of this new surge of cases, which is largely driven by the Delta variant.
You just heard from World Health Organization Philippine Representative Dr. Rabindra Abayasinghe saying that there is now community transmission in the Philippines of the more infectious Delta variant.
And after the country tallied its highest case count on record yesterday, the health department warns infections are bound to get higher. Good evening, I'm Gretchen Ho.
I'm Robbie Alampay. You're watching The Big Story. We begin with the WHO confirming what has been suspected to be the driving force in the ongoing uptick in cases in the Philippines.
The Delta variant is now the dominant variant in the country, and it is bound to push cases even higher. Mobile journalist Jacob Lazaro has the front seat to this big story.
COVID-19 continues its record-breaking streak in the country as active cases in some NCR Plus areas are exceeding the projections of the Department of Health. In Rizal and Laguna, the number of active cases were more than double the earlier projections. Cavite's numbers were almost just as alarming.
And for Rizal, they had twice the number of active cases at 5,470 versus the 2,118 to 2,494 projected numbers.
Some good news though, NCR and Bulacan's numbers were much lower than projected. NCR's active cases were only a third of the earlier projection. The Octa Research Group says expect the number of new cases to play between 14,000 to 19,000 per day for the next few days. On Tuesday, the number of new cases momentarily dipped to 13,827, lower than the previous day's record of 22,000 for the whole country. But authorities expect the numbers to climb even higher in September.
If the same pattern will occur this time around, we may see cases peak mid-September.
The World Health Organization has already confirmed that the Delta variant is now the most dominant variant in the country. WHO representative to the Philippines, Dr. Rabindra Abayasinghe, noted the findings of the Philippine Genome Center that 7 out of 10 COVID-positive samples were already that of the Delta variant. Abayasinghe also confirmed community transmission of the hyper-contagious variant in the Philippines.
The Delta variant has emerged as the dominant variant. With this kind of transmission, with these kinds of numbers, we are in community transmission with the Delta variant.
Vergeres said increasing cases could also be attributed to our increasing testing capacity that's averaging 67,000 per day. Vergeres says the rate of severe and critical cases remain at less than 2%. I'm Jacob Lazaro and we are One News.
And what is the Health Department's action plan now that the WHO confirmed the community transmission of the Delta variant? To tell us about this, joining us tonight, DOH Undersecretary and Treatment Czar Leopoldo Vega. Dr. Vega, welcome to The Big Story.
Good evening, Robbie. Good evening to Gretchen.
Sir, we don't want to take this for granted, so very quickly, review of terminology tayo. Community transmission, now this is being confirmed by the WHO, and also another term, dominant variant. What is the significance of these two terms, community transmission and the dominant variant, referring to the Delta variant?
When you say dominant, Robbie, it means that it has overtaken the number of variants that are around. Compared this with the original Wuhan variant. And definitely when you say dominant, it's now the #1 variant that you see in the biosurveillance. Roughly with the 700 samples that was examined by the UP Genome Center, they found out about roughly more 68% of this was the Delta variant. So in other words, it's becoming the dominant variant in terms of the COVID-19 virus pandemic now. And when you say community, it means that we can no longer see a link between the persons that have it. Before, you used to see this in the returning overseas Filipinos, but mostly these are now occurring in clusters, in communities, and there are no links, however, on where they came from. So that basically means it's a community transmission, it's a local transmission that's going on with this variant right now.
So community transmission, hindi na po natin matrace. Sa dami ng mga kaso, hindi na natin alam kung kanino ka nahawa. Yung dominant variant now, we're referring to the Delta variant. As we know, it is more infectious. How do these two numbers, these two realities now change the game? Does it change our game plan?
The game plan is still the same. It's just that we have to intensify our testing, tracing, and isolation, and of course, treatment. And you can see that the number of cases have been scaling up compared with April, but there is a bit difference that we saw in the wave that we saw last April compared with this present one, because the number of, or the percentage of the severe and critical is roughly below 2%. That's 1.86%. And it's not comparable with last April, which in the percentage was about 3 to 4%. So I guess the reason for this is the vaccination, especially here in Metro Manila, is really scaled up, and it has protected the community in a sense.
Okay, maraming salamat po, Dr. Vega. That was Dr. Leopoldo Vega, Undersecretary at the Department of Health. Delta variant cases have steadily risen since the first local case was detected in July, making it now the dominant COVID-19 variant in the Philippines. Tonight's big number, 69.98%, practically 70%. That is the percentage of Delta variant cases out of all samples in recent sequencing runs conducted by the Philippine Genome Center. That's more than a 10-fold jump from just around 6% recorded in July. Total Delta variant infections locally have hit 1,789. The Health Department notes that Delta variant cases are also overtaking other variants.
These are the other big stories tonight. The president unleashes personal attacks against lawmakers probing the government's purchase of overpriced medical supplies. One senator says they might even end up investigating the chief executive. The Department of Health only has until today to release the special risk allowances for healthcare workers, but many frontliners have yet to receive their benefits. And the Gilas Pilipinas squad will battle it out against New Zealand, Korea, and India in Group A of the FIBA World Cup Asian qualifiers. These big stories after the break.
Good evening. You're still watching The Big Story. I'm Robbie Alampay.
And I'm Gretchen Ho.
As senators now lock horns with President Duterte over questionable contracts in the government's handling of pandemic funds.
Senator Gordon says they are not discounting just yet the possibility of investigating the chief executive and even one of their own, Senator Bongo. A look at the heated verbal exchange in Camille Samonte's report.
Siya ang nanalo sa Tokaton champion. Puro dalda. Kanya ang tanong, kanya yung sagot, at siya magsabi kung mali ka o hindi.
President Rodrigo Duterte went on a no-holds-barred personal tirade against Senate Blue Ribbon Committee Chairperson Richard Gordon. The senators' panel is probing the Budget Department's purchase of overpriced medical items during the pandemic. The corporation which bagged the 8.7 billion peso contract in question was formally a firm with only minimal capital and no prior bidding record. It is now being linked to former economic advisor Michael Yang and former Budget Undersecretary Lloyd Lau. For Gordon, the president should be scrutinizing this instead.
Hindi, dapat bigyan ng atensyon ng presidente. Uy, Lau, in-appoint kita dyan. Bakit ang laki-laki ng mga binibili mo at hindi mo may paliwanag sa Blue Ribbon? Sagutin mo yan. Hindi dapat nasabihin niya. Hindi, sasabihin niya, mga tao, mga kababayan, huwag niyong pakinggan ang Blue Ribbon. Huwag niyong pakinggan ang Senado.
Lau is now being linked to the president's closest aide, Senator Bongo. Gordon said they would investigate Go and even Duterte if they have to. But Go is not taking this lightly.
Handa po akong magpaimbestiga. Wala po akong tinatago. Wala po akong kinakatakutan. Mas mabuting malaman ng tao ang katotohanan para matapos na rin po ang haka-haka mula dyan kay Lau na yan.
He also challenged Gordon to inhibit himself from inquiries involving PhilHealth. Gordon's Philippine Red Cross has a multi-million memorandum of agreement with the state insurer.
Hindi ba may conflict of interest na isa sa iniimbestigahan mo ay katransaksyon ng organisasyong pinamumunuan mo? Nagtatanong lang po, Mr. President.
But Gordon countered Senator Go's allegation, saying that there's a proper committee to discuss the issue.
Hindi po ako lumapit sa gobyerno. Ang gobyerno ang lumapit sa amin.
Gordon believes that the series of tirades being thrown against him is a clear attempt to divert the public's attention from findings in Blue Ribbon hearings. For News 5, Camille Samonte, We Are One News.
Competing factions of the president's party, PDP Laban, are also at loggerheads over who really has control of the group. The Commission on Elections is not stepping in just yet to play referee for PDP Laban. Comelec spokesperson James Jimenez told 1PH sa Totoo Lang that the ruling political party will not be a problem unless they submit 2 separate authorized signatories by September 30. PDP Laban is currently fraught with internal leadership issues with members split between the camps of Energy Secretary Alfonso Cusi and that of Senators Coco Pimentel and Manny Pacquiao.
Right now kasi, internal matter pa lang ito. Sila ang may problema, dapat nilang resolbahin. I understand na this is like political soap opera. But at this point, hindi pa siya controversy na makikialam ang Congress.
In the middle of all these political talk, healthcare workers continue to bear the brunt of handling the pandemic on the ground. Thousands of them were supposed to receive their special risk allowance today, the deadline set by the president for the release of the said benefits. But that is not the case for many of them. JC Cosico with the details.
Workers of the state-run Dr. Jose Fabella Memorial Hospital held a noise barrage during their lunch break. They joined the growing cry for the release of the much-needed special risk allowances.
Asan ang benepisyo ng mga health workers? Pakinggan niyo kami!
The president had ordered the health department to disburse the SRAs in 10 days, the deadline being today, Tuesday. And yet, Fabella workers got nothing. They minced no words in calling out Health Secretary Francisco Duque and even demanded his resignation.
Asan na ang konsensya mo? Huwag kang magtulog-tulugan! Huwag kang magtabo sa lalim na sayang ni Duterte! Na inililigtas ka sa lahat ng kasalanang ginawa ninyong mga taga-DOH!
Fabella's Union President Margarita Esquivel also called for the SRA of janitors and security guards, as well as everybody's meal, accommodation, and transportation allowances.
Nagpagod ang mga tao at saka halos puyat at sila yung mga naka-expose sa COVID.
In the DOH latest report, a chunk of the 311 million peso budget for the SRA had already been downloaded to regional offices. More than 273 million had already been disbursed to private and public hospitals. The remaining 74.5 million pesos is up for distribution. The DOH said some 20,000 healthcare workers will benefit from this tranche. It asked for everybody's patience, saying it requested additional funds from the budget department. The agency also called on hospitals to submit a list of healthcare workers who have yet to be compensated. DOH Undersecretary Maria Rosario Vergere said their SRAs would depend on their respective shifts.
So hindi po yan magkakapare-pareho na across the board bibigyan natin ng 5,000 kasi hindi po yun ang sinasabi ng polisiya.
But for the employees of Abella Hospital, the fight is not over. They plan to join protests tomorrow. They're also looking into filing cases against Duque. For News 5, JC Cosico, We Are One News.
Now for the big story in sports, it's final. The Philippines joins Group A in the FIBA World Cup Asian qualifiers. The country will compete with New Zealand, Korea, and India. The first window of the home and away qualifiers is set this November, with the next windows in the first round scheduled on February and June to July of next year. Being one of the 3 host countries for 2022, the Philippines is already guaranteed a World Cup spot, no matter what happens in the qualifiers. Time for another quick break. When we return, Hong Kong-bound OFWs continue to line up for yellow cards, but they have to face one more challenge: banned PAL flights to the city-state. And it's green and go for PBA games starting tomorrow with a triple header already scheduled on day 1. The details after the break.
Good evening. You're still watching The Big Story. I'm Robbie Alampay.
And I'm Gretchen Ho. Challenges for OFWs bound for Hong Kong continue to pile up after the city-state banned Philippine Airlines commercial flights.
Adding to the burden is the costly stay in quarantine facilities in Hong Kong. To help ease their worries, they now want yellow cards to be released for free. Gerard Dela Peña has the story.
Hundreds of overseas Filipino workers have been lining up at the satellite office of the Bureau of Quarantine in Quezon City. They all want to get their hands on one of these yellow cards. They're key to employment abroad.
Nung nag-register ako, marami nang naunang naka-register. So talagang kung ano lang yung available slot.
Of course, there were also those lucky enough to have secured a slot.
Medyo matagal lang konti kasi nga ilan lang yung computer na nandoon.
The BOQ said it is trying its best to expand its capacity.
Ang problem po namin is talagang human resources. So humingi po sana kami ng tulong talaga sa DOH and even DBM po na mabigyan kami ng allocation.
This is just one of many woes that OFWs are facing, especially those bound for Hong Kong. Hong Kong recently banned Philippine Airlines flights for 2 weeks until September 11 after passengers from Manila were confirmed to have COVID-19. PAL will still get to fly to Hong Kong, but will only carry cargoes. Those who manage to fly to Hong Kong will have to shell out 800 Hong Kong dollars or around 5,000 pesos a day for their 21-day quarantine. Because of this, they have called on the government to at least waive 370 peso charge for the yellow cards.
Kasi the stranded are all baon sa utang, no? Simula nung nag-apply sila at naghihintay na makapunta sa Hong Kong. So talagang kahit 370 pesos yung cost ng yellow card, malaking halaga din sa kanila yun.
Lawmakers are looking at the possibility of giving yellow cards to OFWs for free. For News 5, Gerard de la Peña, We Are One News.
OFWs and their families back here in the Philippines are also forced to be thriftier under this pandemic. The lower spending, however, is sending a ripple effect to the economy. Mobile journalist Pamela Vasquez explains that in this report.
Eating together with the kids.
42-year-old Revlin Allegoria now makes more of an effort to save the money her husband sends. Her husband, who's an electrical engineer in Saudi Arabia, usually sends about 50,000 pesos a month. She allots 35,000 pesos for their expenses, while the remaining 50,000 automatically goes straight to their eldest child's bank account. Revlin says she started saving more after hearing of a family friend who spent more than 1 million pesos in hospital fees after acquiring COVID.
Hindi natin alam kung hanggang kailan yung pandemic.
Meanwhile, COVID restrictions forced domestic helper Marjo to extend her stay in Kuwait for 2 more years. Feeling uncertain about the future, she started cutting down the monthly remittance she sends to her family in Isabela Province.
Noon po 20 yung pinakadala ko, tapos yung natitira sa akin 5,000. Ngayon po yung natitira ngayon 20, tapos yung napapadala ko po 5,000.
Revlin and Marjo are just 2 examples of OFW families who are spending less and setting aside more of their earnings. According to a recent study conducted by the insurer AIA, 77% of respondents said they are saving more due to the pandemic. More than half said they are saving for either emergency spending, financial security, or medical expenses. But the Philippines is a consumer-driven economy, and a big chunk of that comes from remittances. So when people spend less, that causes a ripple effect.
So if you were an OFW planning to come home and have a very, very big wedding, that won't happen also. So when you don't have that big wedding, there's a large ripple effect to all of the suppliers attached to that.
Still, Guillermo says Filipinos will eventually go back to their old spending habits.
Part of our culture is we are a spend-first type of culture.
The recently launched Overseas Filipino Bank says it has rolled out in 113 countries with the express goal of helping OFWs save and invest more. I'm Pamela Vasquez and we are One News.
And here are other big stories from around the world. The United States has completed the withdrawal of its forces from Afghanistan, effectively ending 20 years of conflict. The operation came to an end before the Tuesday deadline set by U.S. President Joe Biden. Celebratory shots rang out in Kabul as the last of the U.S. troops left the country. The U.S. military admits thousands of Afghans who helped them were left behind, as well as dozens of other Americans. And South Africa detected a new COVID-19 variant with multiple mutations. The yet unreviewed research shows that variant C12 was first detected in May and has now spread to most South African provinces and to 7 other countries. But whether or not it is more contagious or has the ability to escape vaccines have yet to be established.
Another big story in sports. The PBA has released its schedule for the resumption of the 2021 Philippine Cup in Bacolor, Pampanga. 3 games are slated tomorrow, starting with a clash between the TNT Tropang Giga and the Blackwater Bossing at 12:30 p.m. The San Miguel Beerman and Terra Firma Jeep then take the floor at 3 p.m., while league leader Magnolia HOTSHOTS dukes it out with the Meralco Bolts at 6 p.m. to cap off day 1. In the 12-team field, only the Northport Batang Pier are missing from the weekly schedule, which may likely be due to positive COVID-19 cases among team personnel and players.
Kalingas mambabatok, Apawang Od, did not give her consent for a tattooing masterclass at Nas Academy, owned by vlogger Yosar Nasin, aka Nas Daily. Those were the findings of the National Commission on Indigenous Peoples after it interviewed Apawang Od, her family, and Kalinga officials. The NCIP said Wang Od is not aware of any contract, much less affix her thumbprint onto one. The agency said Nas Daily's promises are outside of a written agreement. The Mambabatok's representative, Stella Palangdao, said they were asked to sign a deal for mere filming, interview, and photography. Worse, the NCIP found out that the contract was grossly onerous. NAS Daily would have exclusive ownership of the course and has full rights to alter and transfer its contents unilaterally. NAS Daily denied the NCIP's pronouncements. He said he was not given the chance to explain his side before the commission released a statement. NAS Daily expressed readiness to cooperate with the NCIP's investigation and vowed to continue his mission in the country. Nick Garcia, We Are One News.
It is the last day of August, and you know what that means, Gretch? Jose Marichan means will flood your social media timelines as we usher in the Burr months. Artist Dakanay made a leaf art depicting half of Jose Mari's face, captioned, "May sumisilip." This Twitter user, meanwhile, edited the still of Dr. Octopus from the trailer of Spider-Man No Way Home. This time, though, he says, "Hello, September!" And speaking of which, a Facebook user superimposed Jose Mari's face on Billie Joe Armstrong of Green Day. The band's signature song, "Wake Me Up When September Ends," has also been a trademark meme for the month. The user mashed up the lyrics of their respective songs. And here, Jose Marichan is supposedly on a Zoom meeting with another Christmas icon, Mariah Carey, as they get their makeup done.
My favorite time of the year.
Welcome back. Welcome back.
Actually, nag-ano lang kami ni Jose Marichan eh.
Yeah.
Para nagkakahiyaan kami sino una lalabas, ako o siya.
Ang tagal mo na wala.
Nauna ako.
Isipin mo, umalis ka dito, end of July, bumalik ka, Pasko na.
Kasi para matapos na yung problema. Diba? We bounce from one good thing to the other, Olympics, tapos Pasko.
Kaya kung ano naman yung inaantay natin sa Bear Months, hopefully mag-good vibes. Ang daming nagkagulo nung nawala ka.
Ay, wow. Nandito na ako to
Kaya,
set the mood.
natin.
But a while ago, we had the FIBA World Cup draw. And it's starting. We have 2 years left until the hosting of the FIBA World Cup 2023. And I'm so excited for that.
Sinong
We're
bracket
grouped
natin?
with New Zealand, India, and Korea. Tapos katext ko si Coach Sandy, masaya siya.
Masaya
so that's
siya.
a good sign. Oo.
Kasi South Korea, kontrapelo natin.
Oo,
Pero
natalo na
New
natin.
Zealand, mukhang malakas New Zealand
better
doon.
New Zealand kaysa Australia.
No, sige,
Oo,
anyway.
tapos yung India, kulang daw sa international exposure, sabi ni Coach Tab kanina. So mukhang malakas ang ating mga chance.
Anyway, we're on our way. Pasko muna. Unahin muna natin ang Pasko.
Well, that wraps up today's big story. Catch us again tomorrow at 8 p.m. on Signal Channels 8 and 250. And wait, partner, before anybody else says it, I love Christmas because it's the only time I can say, ho, ho, ho!
Sige, maraming utang. Please like our Facebook page, One News. For more in-depth analysis, visit our webpage, onenews.ph. Mask on.
Wash hands.
And stay safe, Philippines. I'm Robbie Alampay.
And I'm Gretchen Ho. We are One News. Have a good evening.